Long ago in a distant land, I, that Minnesotan guy, witnessed a series so epic that I instantly fell in love with it. The series unleashed pure awesomeness and stood out from its competition, but a certain corporate network wielding terrible powers stepped forth to oppose it. Before the series concluded its run, the network canceled it, and thus the series was put into hibernation. The network declined as the years went on, but the series' legacy lasted in the future. 13 years passed, and my love for the series never died. Time has no effect on the things you cherish. Yet, the truth must be told. The series returned, but this time around, things were different, and now comes the moment of reckoning. I must reveal what happened and what I saw during the return. Gotta get back. Back to the past. Samurai Jack!
Gotta get back to the past, Samurai Jack. Gotta get back to the past, Samurai Jack.
Jack.
Gotta get back to the past, Samurai Jack. Gotta get back to the past, Samurai Jack.
Jack.
Gotta get back,
Jack.
gotta get back, Samurai Jack.
Hello and welcome to part 49 of my Samurai Jack retrospective. I'm your host, That Minnesotan Guy. You know, within the span of 48 parts, you've probably picked up on the fact that I love Samurai Jack. I've been very open about it, and let's just say that I'm quite the fan. Well, folks, we have finished the original run of Samurai Jack, and I can now discuss in detail my thoughts regarding Season 5. This review is going to be different from the other parts that I have done. In this case, I'll be going into more depth than I ever have before. In other words, this will be a long conclusion to this retrospective, and if you've been watching the other parts, I did throw in a few teases for this review. Now, before I begin this review, I believe that an introduction is necessary because if I'm going to be in depth, the only way I could start is by making a lengthy intro. In retrospect, I don't believe that I gave a proper introduction for Samurai Jack when I did the first part of this retrospective. Guess I'll do it again with more details. Though, I hope no one gets bored with it. Now, let's have a recap of Samurai Jack. Samurai Jack, birthed as a series in the early 2000s, spans 4 seasons released between the years 2001 to 2004, and moved beyond its television roots, spreading into comics and video games, earned itself a respectable following, and in my opinion is one of the most successful epics in the history of television. While there have been other successful epics, such as Avatar: The Last Airbender. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy Avatar: The Last Airbender as much as the next person. There was nothing like Samurai Jack when it first premiered. It was a unique show, and it managed to impress me in a way that no other television show has been able to do. I mostly believe that this is due to Genndy Tartakovsky's skill and talent as a filmmaker. Yes, I dare to say that. While most people will see Genndy Tartakovsky as an animator, I honestly believe that the man has achieved the rank of filmmaker through his own career, and if you really think about it, there really aren't that many filmmakers with such a big name in animation. The only 3 that I can think of who have the same rank as Genndy Tartakovsky are Hayao Miyazaki, only he was special to the anime community, Don Bluth, who started strong but declined in later years, and Ralph Bakshi, who I hear has some interesting works. Outside of that, I can't think of any. Although there are a few TV animators who have this rank as well, such as Craig McCracken. When released, Samurai Jack changed the animation landscape for great reasons. It was a show that didn't rely heavily on exposition and had a distinctive look that no other animated show has been able to top. It really was the hot new show of its time. The show also became the face of Genndy Tartakovsky and represents his talents to the fullest. It's true what I say. For every filmmaker out there, there's always that one thing they made that became their most famous creation. Though if you acknowledge them for their other creations, they feel happy. Considering how long my retrospective has been so far, I'm sure that you've understood why I love Samurai Jack so much. I love it for the story, action sequences, epic music, and the interesting characters. I also love the first 4 seasons of Samurai Jack because they are consistent with the world that they've set up and established. As for Season 5, there is a noticeable difference from the tone that the 4 seasons had. I'll go into detail on this as I go on in this review, but for now, there are some things that need to be addressed. Not only do I love the consistent tone of the 4 seasons, but I also believe that the story of Samurai Jack is seamless, and I've come to realize this when watching the 4 seasons back to back. I've heard arguments that the episodes of Samurai Jack can be assembled in any order, but I personally disagree with this. I believe that if you were to create your own personal order of the episodes, you would get something that would feel rather sporadic. While there are a few instances throughout the 4 seasons that do break the seamless feel, they aren't enough to collapse the series as a whole. I hope with my argument that there are others who can stand behind me, and if there are, welcome to the club. Whenever I binge watch the 4 seasons back to back, I've always come to understand that Samurai Jack is to television what Star Wars is to cinema. Yes, I do mean that. Let me explain. When Star Wars birthed in 1977, there was nothing else like it, and over the decades of its existence, it became the biggest space epic known to man. People fell in love with it either for its story, characters, music, action sequences, or cultural impact, and whenever there was any kind of announcement surrounding it, the hype was there, and the cinemas became the go-to place to witness Star Wars firsthand, especially if it was on the biggest screen possible. With Samurai Jack, it too received an impact, and any announcement surrounding it will have a huge amount of hype from the fans, and they will be there for it on day one. Hopefully that makes some sense. Now I should bring up, how exactly did Samurai Jack come into the world? Genndy Tartakovsky found his first success in the year 1996 with the release of Dexter's Laboratory, a science fiction comedy series which revolved around a young boy genius who was always inventing and doing experiments in the name of science. Though his sister Dee Dee always foils these experiments, he continues with nothing to stop him in his never-ending quest for scientific advancement. The show found considerable success on Cartoon Network and has gained a following of its own. After 2 seasons and 1 made-for-TV film, Tartakovsky became exhausted and later went to work with his friend Craig McCracken on the Powerpuff Girls. However, Tartakovsky wanted to do something different from comedy and decided that an action show would be best. He then pitched Samurai Jack to CN executive Mike Lazo by saying, and I quote, "Hey, remember David Carradine in Kung Fu? Wasn't that cool?" And thus, the series was born. Tartakovsky has stated that he was always fascinated with samurai culture and the Bushido Code, and looking at the series as a whole, it definitely shows, especially in regard to the wisdom and philosophy of Jack himself. Tartakovsky also stated that he'd have a recurring dream where he would travel a post-apocalyptic world fighting mutants with a katana and his crush at his side. A wandering warrior with his lady friend coming across various dangers throughout the world they live in. That's something that would show up in a later work. Genndy Tartakovsky has listed several influences for Samurai Jack, such as Conan the Barbarian, The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, Star Wars, Blade Runner, Seven Samurai, Ben-Hur, Lawrence of Arabia, Spartacus, Frank Miller's Ronin, Frank Miller's 300, and Lone Wolf and Cub. The evidence of these influences is very present. It makes sense that past epics would inspire a future epic. As Genndy Tartakovsky worked on Samurai Jack, Dexter's Laboratory continued without him for 2 more seasons and ended in 2003, a year before Samurai Jack was cancelled. Yes, the dreaded cancellation order was given to Jack, yet hope remained for the series. Samurai Jack ended its original run in 2004 with no clear ending. not a cliffhanger, but more along the lines of open ending. Genndy Tartakovsky has stated this regarding the conclusion of Jack's original run. Coming close to the end of the 4th season, we're like, are we going to finish it? And I didn't know. The network didn't know. They were going through a lot of transitions also. So I decided, I don't want to rush and finish the whole story, and so we just left it like there is no conclusion, and then the final is just like another episode. Art director Scott Wills backed this up with his own statement. We didn't have time to think about it, because we went right into Clone Wars. They even overlapped, I think. There was no time to even think about it. Looking back at these statements, I completely understand what was going on here. The team working on Jack was burnt out and they were getting exhausted. So I like how Genndy and his friends knew that they didn't have the energy in them and didn't want to rush out an ending, because if you're going to make a proper ending, you need as much creative energy as you can get. Although Jack was taken off the air, it would still receive attention in the streaming service Toonami Jetstream and became a staple of the service itself. I admit to watching Jack a lot on Toonami Jetstream, and my love of the series became greater via that service. Samurai Jack would also return to Toonami itself on various occasions. It returned during Toonami's final years on Cartoon Network, and even during the revival on Adult Swim. I was there for these returns as the show is very personal to me, and I hope there were others who returned as well. Samurai Jack is personal to me because it defined my love of epic storytelling, and like Star Wars, I felt an intense amount of hype for whenever Jack returned. As for Genndy Tartakovsky, he went on to create Star Wars Clone Wars, Symbionic Titan, and the Hotel Transylvania series. All of this kept him pretty busy while Jack remained dormant, but all of that changed when this dropped in the winter of 2015. I had just started college, and this announcement was quite possibly the best thing I could ever receive during that point in my life. I still remember the day when my sister sent this news to me, and let's just say that I felt the same way Star Wars fans did when they saw the first trailer for The Phantom Menace. The idea of a great property coming back to save us from the years of garbage is something to really get excited about, especially since Cartoon Network went down the rabbit hole and Adult Swim was shaping up to be the modern savior of animation. Now let me tell you how Season 5 of Samurai Jack got the green light. Originally, Season 5 of Samurai Jack was supposed to be a film that would act as a conclusion to Jack's story. There were 4 different studios that expressed interest in doing this. In 2002, Cartoon Network was in association with New Line Cinema, the studio responsible for bringing the Lord of the Rings trilogy, to produce a live-action film of Samurai Jack. This never happened due to the commercial failure of the Powerpuff Girls movie, and Genndy Tartakovsky stated that, "We will finish the story, and there will be an animated film." I agree with this statement given Hollywood's history with adapting animated properties into live-action films. In 2007, Frederator Films, the studio responsible for animated properties like The Fairly OddParents and Adventure Time, announced that they would develop a film of Samurai Jack in stereoscopic 2D with a budget of $20 million. Never happened. In 2009, J.J. Abrams' production company Bad Robot, the studio responsible for productions such as Cloverfield and Lost, announced a film was being developed. Never happened. In 2012, Sony expressed interest in developing a Samurai Jack film, and ultimately, nothing came of this. After all these startups failed to get off the ground, Tartakovsky decided this would work best on television rather than as a film. What I find interesting is that with Season 5, if you really think about it, it's actually the film that Tartakovsky wanted to make, and watching the episodes of that season back to back, you can see that if you put them together, it would create at least a 2-hour and 45-minute or even a 3-hour film. The evidence is quite clear. As I said before, Jack returned to the revived Toonami on Adult Swim in 2014, a year before the teaser announcement of Season 5. What I find interesting about this is that it's actually a parallel to Star Wars. In 1997, George Lucas brought Star Wars back to cinemas with his special editions, and then 2 years later, Star Wars returned with the prequel trilogy starting in 1999.
Samurai Jack and Star Wars have a big connection, and given how Star Wars was a major influence for Genndy Tartakovsky, the connection becomes more and more clear when you think about it. It's fascinating, and I can't stress that enough.
Although the 2015 teaser trailer suggested a 2016 release date, the fifth season was ultimately delayed to the spring of 2017. I remember not wanting to wait any longer given that my hype was already at a high point, but I understand that sometimes production teams need more time to complete projects. Several sneak peeks happened throughout 2016, and as the release for Season 5 got closer, there were several questions surrounding Samurai Jack itself, and it also helped that part of the hype for Season 5 was that it was marketed as Jack's ending. Would Jack go back to the past? What was Aku's role in Season 5? What characters from the previous seasons would return? Would Jack stay in the future and not go back to the past? What tropes from the previous seasons would return? Was there anything new in store for the fans?
I mean it. The hype for this season was off the charts.
1 month before the release of Season 5, a trailer was released which fueled all the speculation I mentioned, but that wasn't all though. Prior to the premiere of Season 5, Adult Swim gave fans the ultimate treat. They played some of the original episodes to fuel the hype, and I remember they got as far as Episode 8 or Episode 9 before the new episode aired, and they also had an endless stream on their website, which I tuned into quite often.
When Adult Swim re-aired the original episodes, I was hit with sudden inspiration, and that's how I started this retrospective. I sense a potential commentary in the future.
Not only would Adult Swim claim Samurai Jack for themselves, but the new season would air on the revived Toonami, and I remember being extremely excited about this because it harkened back to my childhood where Toonami would play a mix of American action cartoons and anime. I made it a point every Saturday night to watch a new episode of Samurai Jack, bringing good and bad memories alike.
Wow, that was quite the introduction. Now, for the purposes of this review, I will be covering all 10 episodes of Season 5 in one review. The reason for why is because each episode picks up immediately where the last one leaves off, and if you remember my reviews of the premiere movie, The Birth of Evil, and The Scotsman Saves Jack, those were all 2 or 3 parters, so it made sense for me to cover those in one video. If you don't like long reviews and just want the Cliff Notes version of my experience with Season 5, here it is. When it started, I was liking it and warming up to it. Midway through, I believed the season was living up to the hype. But then, as it got closer to the ending, I got disappointed, and that turned into anger. Yeah, this season has a 3-act structure. As someone who is a big fan of Samurai Jack, what exactly was my experience with Season 5? Let's conclude this journey. This is Samurai Jack, Season 5.
To start off this review, I must mention that there is a significant gap in terms of the Roman numeral count. Season 4 ended with episode 52, and Season 5 starts with episode 92. The season also ends with the number 101. This is meant to symbolize that a significant amount of time has passed. I'll go into more detail in a little bit here, but I must ask, what adventures did Jack have between 52 and 92?
Having a huge gap like that only creates more questions than answers, so I won't dwell on that too much. Now let's get this show on the road.
The season starts with a town under attack. We see a family of 3 escaping from Beetlebots, and as the Beetlebots surround them, we see the family communicating via some form of telepathy.
Be prepared for a rant, because the heart symbol that you saw is only an indicator of something worse.
The Beetlebots notice an armored figure on a motorcycle who then takes out a heavy gun and fires a rocket which destroys a chunk of them. The armored figure then switches over to rapid fire and takes out even more beetles.
Sweet, we have some action already. Good to know that Tartakovsky knows what we want as an audience.
The armored figure then activates wheel spikes and mows down large amounts of the Beetlebots like they are nothing more than grass. One of the Beetlebots knocks the armored figure off his bike, but the armored figure blows its mechanical brains out with a pistol. The armored figure takes out more before switching over to a spear with an electrical add-on.
I do like the establishment that this figure is heavily armed and is ready for almost any kind of obstacle, though we are missing something important, but that will be for later. Now let's get something really cool to see. Cool, but just you wait, we'll be getting something really interesting. It's Jack, only with longer hair and a beard. So we're already 3 minutes into Season 5, and already there is a problem with it. That's not good. That moment where we see that line of A's is just rather distracting and takes me out of the scene. I don't even know why it was necessary, because there have been several moments throughout the series where Jack screams heroically, and it's just that. No distracting things in the background. Just Jack being an epic hero. The moment itself is very comic book in nature. In comic books, characters will often have these letters or even words to describe their grunts, screams, or cries, and it works because it's playing to the medium and that the reader needs to know what the character is saying. In animation and films, you don't really need that, as the audience can hear this without the need for words or letters. Perhaps Tartakovsky is paying a small tribute, given that comics inspired him to draw, but someone should have told him during production that what works in one medium won't necessarily work in the other. Also, if Season 5 is going to have distracting things like this, then I have something to counter it. I've got 2 more of those ready for use, so be prepared when they show up. I just used my second distraction. Want to know why? An emoji was used. An emoji. Are you fucking kidding me? Why is there an emoji in Samurai Jack? I don't get it. Is it supposed to be funny? It clearly isn't. I don't understand the purpose of using an emoji in an epic story. The heart emoji was used as well. Seriously, this kind of shit doesn't belong in Samurai Jack. This is the equivalent of selling out after years of being unique. It doesn't make you look cool, it makes you look like a fucking normie! Sorry about that. That moment just really pisses me off. Let's finish the scene now.
Jack retrieves his helmet and departs on his bike as the young girl thanks him.
Well now, let's discuss the scene as a whole.
Aside from the comic book text and the unnecessary emojis, this is a great introduction to the new season of Samurai Jack. Instead of unnecessary build-up, we are thrusted into the action with the establishment that Jack has a new set of tools to aid him in his quest. Remember, Jack started out with a horse and several other creatures, and to see him on a motorcycle is actually a good evolution for the character. It was established in the previous 4 seasons that Jack had troubles with technology and preferred to walk, so this change is fascinating to see as it lets the audience know that Jack has changed his tactics and is now working with what the future has to offer him. Jack has adapted to fight on certain occasions beforehand, but I would consider this the first true moment where he is fighting much more radically than he used to. We also see him using real armor and guns to help in combat, which is another fascinating aspect for Jack, as he relied on his sword and other types of weapons that weren't futuristic in the previous 4 seasons. He also had to use makeshift armor on a few occasions. In a way, Jack has gone full road warrior here.
Full road warrior? Well then, guess I need to experiment again. How about we bring the score of Fury Road in? Mad Jack Fury Road. That's the best way to describe this scene.
The introduction itself also presents that high-octane action fans are familiar with, given that we see the BeetleBots being ripped apart and their cords and oil spill out, only with a little more of a gory touch. The BeetleBots themselves are also given a new look, which is much more of an angrier look than a menacing look. If you remember beforehand, the original design of the BeetleBots is iconic due to their red, black, and blue colors, as well as their intimidating appearance. You could argue that the new design is intimidating as well, but I don't know. It doesn't really have the same impact as before, and I like to think that the new design is more of the same, just with a different coat of paint. While it would have been nice to see the original design show up, the new design is still good in its own right.
Now it's time to talk about the new opening for this season.
A new opening reveals to us that 50 years have passed and that Jack has become immortal. This is due to Aku's time displacement. Aku's grasp over the past, present, and future has caused Jack to lose hope of ever going home.
50 years? I imagine that there must have been some big changes. Also, Jack became immortal via the time displacement from Aku. Tartakovsky's handling of time travel is weird in this season, but I'll get into that later. Also, how did Aku not know that his time displacement spell was capable of this? He must not have been reading his spell book well. Moving on.
I do like this opening as it brings the audience up to date on what has been going on for Jack. It also establishes that this season has a more mature and somber tone, which does give this season its own identity, but it brings up something that I need to discuss.
The mature tone of Season 5 is meant to show that Samurai Jack is now in the hands of Adult Swim and not Cartoon Network. You see, the shows of Adult Swim are not meant for a younger audience, and so the new season of Jack benefits from this, as Tartakovsky can do more than what he could previously do when under the shadow of Cartoon Network. Despite that, though, he did manage to make the show seem like it was made for older viewers rather than younger viewers, and it brings up that consistent tone I mentioned. While Season 5 does retain some of the adventure and epic nature that was present in the previous 4 seasons, the consistency is also lost due to the change in tone. This doesn't really bother me too much, as it does support the idea that the show can grow along with its fans, but I do feel like this occurrence caused the show to become different in a way. It's almost like revisiting an old friend, only to find out that they have changed some aspects of their personality as they went on in life. Now, there are a couple more things I would like to bring up about the new opening.
This shot of the opening is one of the best visuals that this show had to offer. I've mentioned it many times before that there are visuals in Samurai Jack that are so epic and breathtaking that your eyes will enjoy the visual treat. One of the strengths of this show has always been its artistic presentation, and Tartakovsky is able to retain that look after taking a long hiatus. It goes to show that his talent never went away after all these years. Oh, and this shot is great as well. However, there are some noticeable changes in the animation that I will need to bring up as we go on.
One last thing I want to bring up about the opening is that I honestly feel that it should have been used only once because the rest of the season uses it 9 more times instead of the iconic theme that fans and myself are familiar with. While the iconic theme does play in the end credits of every episode in Season 5, the lack of it in the opening is disappointing. That's like opening a Star Wars film without the iconic theme and the opening crawl.
Oh, wait. That happened.
Yeah, Star Wars is guilty of that too. Enough about that though, let's continue.
We then cut to a statue of Aku as we see that he is being worshipped by a cult of women.
How about that? Aku has fangirls. Or are they supposed to be groupies?
We then cut to one of the cultists giving birth to 7 daughters as potential opponents to Jack. Surprisingly, the cultist that gave birth gets up just fine with no problem.
7 daughters to do your bidding, Master.
I can understand that the cultist has to recover quickly from this birth for the sake of pacing, but if someone were to give birth to 7 children in real life, they would need to spend some time recovering from the pain because pregnancy can be a rough process. Just saying.
We then cut to Jack as he travels across the desert, passes some rock formations, and then through a forest. In the forest, Jack sees smoke in the distance, and surprisingly, he doesn't check the source.
Jack not checking the source of an attack. This is a very interesting change in character for him, and I'll be addressing it with some details. Let's get into those.
Jack stops by the river for a drink, and then this happens.
Help! Help me, son! You must!
You left us all to...
Jack's getting hallucinations now, a sign of madness. Before I get to that, though, I need to address something in regard to the change in animation.
As you can see with Jack's father, and even Jack himself, there is a noticeable change in the animation. If you look back to the previous 4 seasons, you can see the difference. The previous appearances have full detail, while these new appearances retain a level of detail. It appears that some amount of detail has been lost along the way.
If you're wondering why the animation with the characters look different, that's because Season 5 was made digitally. Tartakovsky adapted to modern technology during the production of Season 5, and this is the result of it. In my opinion, while the digital approach is good and looks amazing on a technical level, as it is faithful to the previous 4 seasons, I feel like certain aspects of detail were lost in the process. The backgrounds still look great, but in terms of the character design, it's almost as if a bad case of plastic surgery happened. The characters in Samurai Jack look more natural with all of the detail applied to them in the previous 4 seasons, while in Season 5, they appear to look rather flashy. I know that Adobe Photoshop was used in the production of Season 5, but I would like to know what other programs were used, because had Tartakovsky used the old way of doing things for Season 5 rather than digital, the characters would have looked better. I don't know. Some things in digital don't work well.
Jack then sees his people in the river looking rather decayed. They all remind him of his lost purpose and that he left them to die. The darkness then clouds in and reveals a menacing shadow figure shrouded in green mist whom Jack is afraid of.
The shadow figure is quite possibly one of the scariest things in this season, and there's a reason for this. If I mention it now, it will spoil the reveal, so I'll save it for later. I do remember, though, that when this season premiered, there was a lot of speculation from fans about who exactly this character was. Some speculated that it could be a character from Jack's past, while others speculated that it could be an evil version of Jack. There was also speculation that the shadow figure could be an embodiment of death itself. This shows how Jack fans were always theorizing about the season itself with all the information that was given to them before the release.
Jack drives away from the river and continues to avoid the smoke. Later that night, Jack is cooking a meal for himself and then receives another vision from his father. By the way, the position Jack's father is in is a callback to the birth of evil, where Jack's father was crucified on a dark tree.
Season 5 has a lot of callbacks to the previous seasons, and I do like them as they help connect this season to the previous ones. Though there is another thing that I will need to bring up later on.
Jack's father, voiced by Sab Shimano, tells Jack, voiced by Phil Lamar, that he's been waiting for his return and that he never came back. Jack states that Aku destroyed the way home. The Emperor says that Aku destroyed everything because Jack never returned and that he has forsaken his people. Jack then receives another visit from the shadow figure and screams in terror. He then drives to the source of the smoke.
I like these scenes of Jack having visions as they help establish that he has lost his way as a samurai and that he is being tormented by guilt and even doubt. It shows that spending all of that time in the future has taken its toll on him and suggests that he could succumb at any point to his madness. These moments are also handled well and play straight into the mature tone that this season is aiming for. Also, when Jack states that Aku destroyed the way home, I remember thinking to myself that Jack still has a chance to get back, as it was established in episode 32 that there is a portal Jack is destined to use to go back to the past. Keep all of this in mind, as it will be important for later on.
We then cut back to the daughters of Aku as they train for battle against Jack. One of them makes a mistake, and the High Priestess, voiced by Grey Griffin, states that any mistake means certain death. A bigger cultist then engages the daughters in brutal combat.
What's interesting about this is that it's a contrast to Jack's training. When Jack was being trained to fight Aku, he was given fair training and would always receive feedback that would give him the need to keep on going. With the daughters of Aku, their training is more harsh and cruel, with a more aggressive a push to take on Jack.
This is the moment where we are introduced to Ashi, voiced by Tara Strong. Ashi sneaks away and sees through a crack that the world is peaceful. Her mother then says that while Aku has created a beautiful world, bullshit, the samurai is out there leaving a wake of devastation. She tells Ashi to stay focused and lets the bigger cultists beat her up.
Man, that's dark. I'm serious. One minute your mother is telling you about the world, then tells you to stay focused, only for one of her friends to beat you up.
As Ashi and her sisters grow, they continue training by jumping from pillar to pillar. Ashi slips, and one of her sisters attempts to help, but their mother states that the weak have no place with Aku. She then drills her staff on Ashi's hand and asks if she is weak. Ashi screams in pain and then continues on. She and her sisters then have arrows shot at them. The High Priestess then says before the statue of Aku that once the daughters succeed, Aku will become present again.
Knowing what happens later on, if the High Priestess saw Aku's state right now, I wonder what her reaction would be.
We cut back to Jack as he arrives at the town. He walks through and sees the dead people as well as the destruction. As he continues on, the culprit is revealed to be Scaramouche, voiced by Tom Kenny. Scaramouche tells him that he destroyed this town days ago just for Jack, and that he is Aku's favorite assassin.
Well, I say assassin. He fits more in line with the bounty hunters that have shown up throughout this show. He claims to be Aku's favorite, but keep this in mind because it will be important for later on. Something I find interesting about Scaramouche is that if you think about it, he is the successor to the bounty hunter we saw in episode 52. Let me explain.
In episode 52, Jack is helping a baby find his parents, and in that episode, he has an encounter with a French bounty hunter. Maybe this is just me, but I like to think that both this bounty hunter and Scaramouche might be connected, or perhaps even relatives of some sort, as they seem to be similar in some ways. They are both robots, they dress fancy, and they have distinction in their voices.
You could say that I'm reading into it way too much, but I can't get that thought out of my head. Another interesting thing you should know about Scaramouche is that Genndy Tartakovsky based him off of singer Sammy Davis Jr. That man's got a taste in smooth jazz.
Scaramouche tells Jack to get out the sword, but then notices that Jack doesn't have it and concludes that Jack lost his sword. We then get a quick flashback that shows how Jack lost his sword.
The flashback was shrouded in the same green mist that we saw the shadow figure in. This creates speculation of whether or not the shadow figure was involved. I want you to keep this scene in mind because it creates the question of how exactly did Jack lose his sword. You might think that it was simple as that, but there is more to it.
Scaramouche attempts to call Aku, and before he can tell Aku the big news, Jack throws a kunai at the phone. Scaramouche then engages in battle by using his flute to merge the stones together in order to create a golem. Jack is able to destroy the golem, but Scaramouche gives the golem another head until Jack destroys that one as well.
I will comment on the fight later, so for now, let's have another hallucination.
Jack then sees the dead children of the town begging him to help them, but Jack pleads with them to understand. The shadow figure reappears looking rather scarier than before.
You think that's scary? Just wait. It gets even more scarier with the shadow figure's future appearances.
Scaramouche then uses the stones against Jack, but Jack counters this with built-in shields and then disarms Scaramouche.
To be fair, X9 had better jazz, so I don't expect Scaramouche to write a tune in order to save his life.
Jack arms himself with knives, and Scaramouche uses musical notes to control his swords. Jack manages to dodge these swords and starts to engage in melee combat. Scaramouche draws out another blade, which possesses the ability to destroy objects at a high frequency. He states that no one plays the notes like he can.
No one! Get it, Beelzebub!
Oh, really?
Jack keeps fighting and his second knife gets the high frequency, but then he throws it at Scaramouche, which destroys the assassin's vocal patterns. Scaramouche pleads for mercy, but Jack cuts him and Scaramouche bleeds out and then explodes until he has nothing except a head. Jack then leaves with the high-frequency blade as a trophy.
With that in mind, we can assume that Jack takes weapons from defeating enemies. This could be a good explanation as to how he got the motorcycle and guns.
This scene, I don't know, it really doesn't have that much excitement for me. While I do like how this harkens back to how Jack would encounter various bounty hunters throughout the series, it seems to lack the high-octane energy that was present whenever Jack encountered said bounty hunters. Don't get me wrong, it's done well for a fight sequence, but I didn't really get a rush of fast energy like I usually would beforehand.
I could look at it and say that I'm just getting used to this new season overall, but it supports my statement that this season lacks some of the consistency from the previous 4 seasons.
We then cut back to the daughters of Aku, as they have now reached adulthood.
I'll admit that when I first saw this moment, I thought that the daughters of Aku had accelerated growth, which could explain how they became adults so quickly. But looking back now, I guess for the sake of pacing, the episode didn't want to dwell too much on their development, as Jack is the main protagonist. I wonder if anyone else had the same thought as me.
The daughters of Aku then fight the other cultists on a pillar, and we get to see small pints of blood as they are all killed. They ascend to the top as a group, and then the high priestess gives them their masks, letting them know that the samurai must die as they run off into the night.
I do like this scene, as it has some of the bloody violence which was promised prior to the release of this season. Trust me, you'll see more blood as we go on. I also like it, as it is setting up a new threat for Jack to face. You've probably noticed that I didn't mention the names of the other daughters. They do have names, Avi, Ami, Aki, Ani, Ali, and Ari, but Ashi is the only one who has any relevance to the plot, and considering how the other daughters don't have much character to them, they will basically be summed up like this. They're nothing more than bits of meat. They are to be killed off one by one.